This will be the first in a series of NFL draft profiles that I'll try to do. Just to be upfront, there won't be any college all-22 or end zone angle film utilized in this video. This will be all commentary with some judgments, some observations that I've made from watching the film. If you follow me on Twitter or you're a member of my Patreon, you're welcome to post up in the comment section letting people know that I do show film on those two platforms of college players, but just not on YouTube. I think Quentin Johnston is one of the most polarizing or perplexing players in this NFL draft, at least for me. He's a 6'4", 210, 215-pound wide receiver, depending on which draft website you utilize for your information. I mean, at times he just thrashed college defenses. He's got a rare combination of speed, explosiveness, size, incredible stride length, with some glaring weaknesses that have been covered and talked about by a number of people. He's supposedly going to run a sub 4.4 40 at the combine, or you know, wherever he does run a 40. It's pretty amazing. Look, he had a 6-catch, 163-yard game against Michigan with a touchdown that I actually think wasn't that impressive, and then followed that up in the national championship game with essentially a stinker. They couldn't get anything going to him. Georgia did a great job defending him, in my opinion. There was clearly at least one, if not two, missed opportunities by the quarterback to get him the football. There are times where he doesn't consistently take advantage of his immense physical traits, his immense physical gifts. 6'4", looks extremely long arms to me. And we'll see at the combine and such, you know, what he measures as. Ability to make people miss once he gets the football in his hands. Stride length on over concepts, Yankee stuff, like even drags or climb concepts. His stride length is unbelievable. He can really get on top of safeties quickly in off coverage. When I say off coverage, I mean like quarters coverage, stuff like that. Quentin Johnston, there's real concerns, there should be, about his lack of contested catches for a wide receiver of his size. You won't get any argument from me that there should be concerns there. He does catch the ball with his body a lot, like in almost every situation. And there's some where he should at least attempt to catch it with his hands, and his effort, I don't want to say effort because that brings up the possibility that I'm trying to say he doesn't give high effort. That's not what I mean. There's times where if he did make an effort to catch it with his hands, he would at least prevent the DB from making a play on the ball. And that I don't want to say that's awareness, but it's consistent. There's deep balls that he doesn't really challenge the DB on. There's some that he didn't even elevate on to challenge the DB. It's a glaring weakness potentially against DBs in the NFL, for real. He had opportunities in the 5 games I watched. I charted 4 games. He had opportunities downfield, I think, times 4, where he didn't really put his hands in the best position to catch the football. And to me, it's kind of like he just finished his 3rd year at TCU. They knew the draft position that was possible for him. Had no one on the staff address it. That shocks me. 2 of the situations I'm mentioning, however, he was clearly held. One of them was Oklahoma State in 2021. It was clearly, it was a middle of the field post, no safety there, and it was an obvious hold, not called. All right. Another one up the right sideline on like a stutter go against Oklahoma State, not called. But we should have a high standard for someone that's going to, with this much talent, and someone that's going to get paid this much money and can make this many plays against high-level competition. I mean, I don't think he played exceptionally well against Michigan in the Final Four game in TCU's upset. I thought Michigan had 3 coverage situations where they blew one coverage on a corner blitz to the boundary, and 2 other calls I think are just poor calls by their defensive coordinator and not allowing players to check out of a bad situation. And Quentin Johnston took advantage of it. I think he is an absolute load when he's able to run free. I'm not saying press man beats him. He's no good at press man. I don't ever try to categorize things as that simple. In my opinion, if you play split field quarters coverages where you're trying to disguise the coverage to the quarterback often and give him the same look or similar looks, and then have it be, sometimes it's clamp, sometimes it's mods, whatever half-field calls a team uses. Point is, you cannot do that if you're pressed up on one down and the next down you're not. You got to make it kind of look similar, and that's why so many teams, even in the NFL, it's more prevalent across college football than the NFL. The Bengals, the Bills, the Broncos, they play that off coverage, corners at 6, 7, 8 yards, safeties at 9 to 10 or 12, and giving the quarterback different looks from on one side of the field from the other. he's potentially for me, he's a top 10 pick. I mean, talent-wise, from my perspective, and other people, no problem disagree. As a Ravens fan and Ravens content creator, there shouldn't be any way he's available where we're picking, in my opinion. The issues or issue, if you want to say that it's two issues, fine. If you want to say it's one, no problem. They can be addressed. He just has so much ability and potential range of impact on the types of routes that he runs. If you're a member of my Patreon again, or you follow me on Twitter, you saw a couple of routes against Michigan where he's available for the football and for whatever reason just not being targeted. I think that there was opportunities there for him to be dominant more often, and sometimes it was he wasn't a part of the read progression. And not blaming the quarterback for that. The quarterback had decided to throw the ball elsewhere based on the read he got, the coverage that he saw pre-snap and post-snap, the post-snap picture. Also, sometimes where Quentin Johnston had opportunities, and because of the way he catches the football, generally catching it with his body, not getting his hands out away from his body, like Steve Smith and so many other people have mentioned, limited those opportunities for him. The three games that I really focused on, three of the four, Michigan, Baylor, and Kansas from 2022. I did watch the Baylor game from 2021. I felt like Baylor in 2022 was a reaction to how well he played against them in 2021 in terms of how much they covered him. I have one other game. I can't remember which one it was, but I didn't cut and organize the plays for a Twitter video. I've put up 3 Twitter videos on him. Again, I watched Oklahoma State in 2021, which was not a great performance by him. I thought the Oklahoma State defense played with a lot of passion, a lot of heart against him. Let me give some observations based on those 4 games generally. To me, his size, athleticism, and his snappy ability on intermediate routes. And that doesn't get talked about a lot. I think he's if you're going to play quarter split field coverages with off corners and off safeties, whether the nickel is to his side or not, he can be effective as the outside receiver, but I think he's incredibly dangerous as an inside receiver, as a slot receiver, number 2, when he's getting a free release. Meaning, and I kind of talked about this earlier, in quarter split field, you're trying to disguise the actual coverage responsibility for the corner and safety on that side, whether they have the nickel to their side or not. So you're not showing or playing press man, unless you're playing press and you're bailing to something else and you're trying to trick the quarterback in that manner. But then in most cases, that's not split field coverage. You're just bailing to something else. In my opinion, that space against teams like, I'm not saying he's going to eat up the Bills, Bengals, and Broncos, but the coverages they generally play on first and second down, corners and safeties off, he will eat up that space fast. And in my opinion, he forces the read, the designation by the defensive backs about what route's being run, what the route combination is, and who they should cover. He forces that decision to happen quicker, and I think he can really hurt split field defenses, which I think is why some of his big plays in the Big 12 are just home runs. In the games that I watched, he becomes just exponentially more dangerous when the safeties and corners are off, in off coverage. Is press man the way to slow him down? Is press man something he's going to have a struggle with? I can't say that, to be honest with you. I mean, watching again, charting 4 games, watching a 5th game, Baylor in 2021. I will say this: when there's more congestion, when there's some competition for the space, whether it's press man, whether it's just being redirected, whatever you want to call it, he's less likely to make the catch. But that's common sense, right? That goes for any receiver. The tighter the coverage, the more opportunities for the defense or the DB to knock the receiver off balance, the more things are tilted in the defense's favor. That goes for any receiver. But I'm talking about Quentin Johnston on like snag concepts, a deep curl, even a sail out. That I'm thinking of 2 completions he had, or 2 catches he had, I think, against Kansas in his best game. Really, 14 catch, 206-yard game-winning touchdown catch. I think they won 38-31. He's more likely to be devastating when it's off coverage, when he's got room to run, because he's such a load. 6'4", 210, 215, like I said, possibility of sub 4.4 speed. Those traits I just think are going to be impossible for someone to pass up, like the Texans at 12. I don't think he gets past, I can't remember, is it Green Bay picks at 15? Anyway, that situation I described about more congestion, more competition, tighter coverage, limiting opportunities for receivers, that's common sense. But in my opinion, that dynamic is more pronounced and more obvious with Quentin Johnston than it is with other bigger receivers. And there really aren't any to compare him to in this draft. I think you kind of got to go to last year's draft to compare him to younger, bigger receivers where that dynamic is somewhat pronounced. In the slot, he's incredibly dangerous to me. I like him moved around, keeping the defense off balance, and not sure of where he will be on every play. I really think that he's a guy who's not going to only play on the left. He's not going to only play on the right. He's not going to only be an outside receiver. When he's moved into the slot, into the number 2 receiver, huge threat to the defense on over concepts, on posts. His rating on posts is apparently unbelievable, like 97 by some rating service, and that doesn't surprise me based on the film that I saw. The deep over concepts he's also exceptional on. Climb concepts, which is kind of like a drag, but it looks like a drag for like the first six yards of it, something like that, and then it turns into a deeper route that goes over the top of the second level. It's very similar to an over concept. He's incredible on that as well. Did see him with one drop against Baylor in 2022. I'm not sure where he'll be lined up at in terms of the percentage of how many times he'll be outside, but in my opinion, you're missing opportunities if you don't put him in the slot, because so many of his big plays came from there. I think one thing I do think, and I actually almost kind of feel like I know this, 1 year from now, he'll be a far better receiver than he is right now. In my opinion, he's got best fits, Tennessee, Houston. I don't think he gets past Houston at 12. If Houston gets what they want at 2, with the way they drafted last year and some of the complementary players, I don't think he gets past them at 12. Against Big 12 DBs this past year, and even like I said in the college football, Final Four, he could just overwhelm certain defensive backs. Look at the 2-week stretch he had in 2022 against Kansas and Oklahoma State. I think he had 14 catches for 206 one week, and then I think 8 catches for 140, if memory serves, the next week. I mean, he made just about every play against Kansas in midseason, including the game-winning touchdown catch. He hadn't done much prior to that. It was like a slot shoulder seam for the game-winning touchdown catch against Kansas, and that's one of the points I want to make, is that even though he made the catch in the end zone against what looked like split field coverage to me, he still didn't really high point the football. He didn't. The ball was kind of thrown a little bit on the outside shoulder, so a little bit of a seam fade from a slot position or number 2 receiver, but he made the play. Comparing him to other wide receivers in this draft, I think, is a flawed approach, and that's why I don't do so. Meaning, Twitter, in my Discord, in person, when people ask me, like, which receiver are you taking, this guy or this guy, it depends on what your needs are. And to me, there's not that many other guys with Quentin Johnston's big playability and size that you're going to pick in the first, second round anyway. Most of the other guys have a different profile, and they're really talented guys. I'm talking about, they just don't offer what Quentin Johnston does in terms of size, explosiveness, speed, ability to break tackles and be physical at times with the football in their hands. So these guys make people miss. Zay Flowers, Josh Downs, Jordan Addison, JSN, Tank Bell, Parker Washington, Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt's a little different animal than some of those other guys because of his verticality and the singular focus that his threat is. Vertical routes, although he's better on intermediate routes than people give him credit for. All those other guys are shifty. They make people miss. They're quick and fast, don't get me wrong, like in the case of like a Tank Dell. Josh Downs is pretty fast too, Zay Flowers. My point is, Quentin Johnston really shouldn't be compared to them. Because, like I said, he offers things they don't. He's dangerous from the slot versus nickel or uncovered in a way that they're not, because of his ability to get vertical with his long strides. Those guys don't have that dynamic in terms of the long strides. He breaks tackles. I think he's got 45 broken tackles in 3 years at TCU. Certainly those guys break tackles too. There's a different manner in which they do so. I don't think they're just running through contact. I think they're making people miss. His big playability with his size separates him from those guys. There's other players I'm not mentioning. I just don't think they're potential first round. Rashee Rice, some other guys, Dante Demas, other guys that are big physical receivers, but they're not going to be drafted in the position potentially that Quentin Johnston is. Here's the problem. The red zone weapon that Quentin Johnston could be is just not been expanded on. Because he doesn't high point the football. To me, this would be a no-brainer that he's a top 4 or 5 pick if that element to his game was installed. If the computer program that he is had red zone threat, back shoulder fade, end zone fade threat there, or, threatening the fade and then pulling it back in for the slant or the under route with his big body and ability to catch the ball out in front of him. But unfortunately, that's not a part of his game. So therein lies the rub. That's the problem. In my opinion, to get a sense of where you think he should be drafted, because I really don't think it matters what the hell I think he should be drafted, or you or anybody else. It matters what the needs are of the team. In order to do so accurately, I think we got to compare him to the bigger receivers in last year's draft. So I'm going to talk about 6 guys, I guess 7. Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams, Chris Olave, Christian Watson, George Pickens. I guess to a lesser extent, Alec Pierce. Out of those guys, there's 3 of them that he doesn't fit the profile on. Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams, and Chris Olave. I guess Jamison Williams a little bit, but he's not nearly as big as Quentin Johnston. To me, of the ones that I mentioned, the one that he kind of fits the most is Christian Watson. Well, it makes sense then why he is projected in so many crazy different places. I mean, we've got people in our Discord that think Quentin Johnston may not even get picked until 25 plus. I think he's long gone by then. Just somebody's got the need and the athletic profile that he has. The Christian Watson comparison isn't even great for real, though, because Christian Watson, on jet sweeps was a home run hitter. That dynamic is not there. Quentin Johnston does not look as explosive on jet sweep stuff. They've tried to give him the ball on that I've seen 6 or 8 times, and it just doesn't produce in the same manner as it did with Christian Watson. Drake London, not an apt comparison in my opinion, because Drake London was talked about as being slow and various other things that were proven to be wrong during his rookie season in the NFL. Even though he had a 6-week stretch there that wasn't super efficient. Don't get me wrong. George Pickens, another one. Alec Pierce, another one. Those guys weren't drafted anywhere near it. But pre-ACL injury, George Pickens is probably a borderline first, second round pick, I would think, just because of the ability level that's there. So to compare him to the other receivers in this year's draft and ask someone to pick I think is a flawed approach, because teams who have a particular need, a big X receiver, are going to take Quentin Johnston. Teams who are looking for a slot are going to take JSN or maybe a Josh Downs, even though Josh Downs plays inside and outside. I think it depends on the need, where the fit is. You got a big body receiver that, for lack of a better word, however, there's another mitigating factor here, doesn't currently play big. I like basketball comparisons, so I'm going to finish with a basketball one, and you guys can tell me if you like it or not. He reminds me of a European NBA big man. Not now, because 2023 is a different story. I'm old, and some of you aren't old. So there was a time where all the European guys that came over were looked at as they didn't play defense. They had glaring weaknesses in their physicality and their toughness when faced with adversity. Nowadays, we understand that the guys who play professional European basketball at age 16 or 17 and travel, I don't care whether it's Italy, I don't care where the hell, France, wherever it is, it's tough. It's far more difficult than we gave it credit 20 years ago. The prevailing opinion was such that those guys were soft. And I'm not saying that Quentin Johnston's soft. I'm making a comparison that the way he's looked at right now is as a big receiver who doesn't play big. Like a 6'10 European NBA star, or someone who could be a star in the NBA, who shoots the hell out of the ball and handles it great. I'm old, so like a Tony Kukoc. Now, if you're young, if you're 20s, you're thinking of different names than I am. If you're in your mid to late 30s, you're probably thinking of Dirk Nowitzki. Point is, someone who's big but doesn't have a big man game. Quentin Johnston, I think, has the ability. If he added the big man game, the back shoulder fade, he added the catching the ball away from his body, elevating to make catches, which I didn't see him elevate over top of people. And certainly the athleticism looks like it's there for me. Maybe the springy bounciness along the sideline, like George Pickens, isn't there. Maybe it's not. A guy who can run the back shoulder fade, adjust to the football, and elevate over people like we saw, if you're a Ravens fan, George Pickens do once or twice against Marlon Humphrey, at least in the first game the Ravens played against the Steelers this year. That's my comparison for Quentin Johnston. It's a poor one, admittedly. It's not a great one. I'm not proud of it, but that's the first one that my brain thought of, is a European guy who is put into a particular role and categorized because of his lack of physicality on the basketball court. Now, translating that to basketball, he's only 6'4", so he'd be a guard in the NBA, but he's not showing big man traits as the big X, even though he is a big X. In my opinion, there's no reason why wherever he does go, wherever he does land, he can't be an 80-catch, 10-touchdown guy soon. Now, I don't know that that necessarily means his rookie year, because let's say he gets drafted by Tennessee. Let's say he gets drafted by Houston. Their quarterback situation is such that who knows that he's going to get 80 actual opportunities to catch the football, 10 actual touchdown opportunities in his rookie season. I think it's possible that he could be that guy by his second or third year, no question, no matter where he lands, if he's given opportunities in the right scheme. I think you got a really good fit in Houston. Who knows who their quarterback is going to be? It all depends on how the top of the draft shakes out. Canes, 411, I think, who's in our Discord, says there's no way he's making it past us at 12. He's a Texans fan, diehard Texans fan. And I trust him there. I don't know that he makes it past New England or Green Bay. I think it's Green Bay at 15. I could be wrong. And who knows the teams in the top 10? Certainly, I don't think the Lions, the Falcons, those guys aren't looking for a big X. The Lions got Jamison Williams last year. They got Amon-Ra St. Brown. The Falcons drafted Drake London last year. They've got Kyle Pitts. I think they have other needs. If Houston addresses their need at, I think it's 2, right, where they are at 2, or they stay at 2, and they get the right player there, I think it's quite possible that Houston gets him at 12. Tennessee, I think, is at 10. I might have the wrong number there. Tennessee could take him, because who knows what they actually think of the Treylon Burks situation. I think it's an interesting dynamic there in Tennessee, what they have. I don't think there's any way you can watch that team play and say that they don't have to get better at certain things, but that's a toughest nails team. I mean, what they did at the end of the year with, I guess, a third string or fourth, Dobbs, the quarterback, coming in and competing for them, adding a Quentin Johnston to that type of franchise with that type of mentality would be interesting. I'm not sure that Tennessee would go for something like that, in my opinion, because of how the Treylon Burks situation worked out last year for them. I think Houston looks like a great fit. New England, possibly. Green Bay, who I think is at 15. You guys let me know what you think of this breakdown. If you listen this long, first of all, I appreciate it. This is a unique situation for me, not showing any film and attempting to just do commentary. I suspect that there will be some people who enjoy it and some people who do not. So I understand that, and I'm aware of it. It's my attempt to try to get some draft content out there early. I watched Quentin Johnston film for the better part of 5 days, maybe 6. And I'm going to move on now to a different receiver. If you have anyone that you'd like to suggest to me, go ahead and do so. I'm super interested in Tank Dell. Not sure where he falls. Zay Flowers as well, where he falls on the draft, prospect range that most people have. As a Ravens fan, Ravens content creator, with them picking at 22 currently, unless they trade back or in some crazy scenario trade up. I don't think a guy like Quentin Johnston's there. Those other 2 guys are certainly probably going to be available, but someone's going to take receiver. There's going to be at least 2 or 3 receivers taken by the 22 area. I think the class looks less professional than Garrett Wilson, Jamison Williams, Drake London, Christian Watson, George Pickens with size. That's what I mean by that. They look less professional with size tagged along to them. I think Quentin Johnston is a unique possibility for NFL teams in this year's draft because of the size, the explosiveness, the speed, and the big playability that he's shown on film. Appreciate you guys' time. If you think other people would like my first attempt at a draft profile on Quentin Johnston, please consider sharing a link on social media to help this video get more reach.